All right. Thank you, George and Peter and Shingai, for joining. It's Education 21. We just heard a little bit from Peter about the ISSS conference, but there's many things that we can catch up on. So, few places to start. One, as always, Shingai, what recent work have you written on?
Yeah, so this past week I decided to summarize a research paper that I really enjoyed from 2020, where some network scientists from South Korea examined the issue of global hegemony through the lens of network science. So the traditional approach in international relations is to essentially say, oh, China's GDP is growing and they're going to surpass the US in GDP. Therefore, China will probably be the next global superpower, like a very reductionist approach. But they take a network science approach to look at the trade of commodities, the trade of arms, and the trade of cultural imports and exports between every country in the world using a UN database. So data from the years 1996 to 2018, and they use various network centrality measures to provide a more holistic and dynamic understanding of where power actually lies, because their perspective is that power needs to be measured by relationships between countries, not just by aggregate measures of GDP. And so, yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to summarize this paper because I thought it was a really cool topic. And I've had some good private feedback. People really enjoyed the sort of practical application of a theoretical concept. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. George or Peter, anything on that?
Well, only to say that I did see the title across my email. I haven't read it, so I will go and read it. And that you and I should probably have a conversation about work I'm doing that's being sponsored by the Network Society, or Network Science Society, where we got a small grant to develop a video as an introduction to network science for teachers and educators. So we're attempting to build a networked approach to creating a video that's engaging with people that might wish to learn about it by actually making a contribution. And so we're trying to think of a platform to host that. I was sort of beginning to talk about Neo4j as a sort of anyway, that's sort of along the lines of what you're going there is like taking a different approach to thinking about anything, but in particular in this case, I said world power, which I think, looking at and doing a meta observation of the observation, which I think is a nice cybernetic idea. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on that, and would like to talk about that some more with you.
Yeah, that would be great. I actually just recently started looking into Neo4j for some of the work that I'm doing with like George's textbook. So yeah, that would be great.
Cool. Oh, nice. Cool. All right, then I'll share an update. This was I'll put the paper in the chat. Wrote this with my colleague Jakob a couple days ago. So I'll just overview it since these are topics we've all discussed. All right, so we introduced this term generative research teams and think about how to use active inference to develop these pure human, pure in silico, or hybrid/augmented teams. Driving questions. Introduction is basically about challenges and opportunities for modern research from just an information overload or cognitive security perspective. GRT describes this type of collaboration that could be a description of an all-human team. It could be a description of an all-digital team. It could be somewhere in between. We'd want these teams to leverage the unique strengths and capacities of each entity, just as they arguably already do, with typos and spell checking and all these like different ways that people from different backgrounds collaborate. So it represents a synthetic intelligence approach. We bring in active inference and as a conceptually unifying approach, but also there's a bunch of tools most of which we've developed in the active inference ecosystem that support the usage and give it more than just kind of a conceptual wrapping, like using the ontology, using a software package, including CAD, using the generalized notation approach, which allows a markdown styled description of cognitive ecosystems, and then using the active entity ontology for science, which is our entity model. We're talking about systems engineering and about roles and areas of concern, how to make a high reliability GRT, GRTs and cognitive security, referencing some of our earlier work and considering the GRT as a cognitive colony and all that entails. Then we give a simpler worked example, and the code is all provided here. In this worked example, we had 2 agents, Carl, Friston, secret Friston, and research assistant Joe. This is what the language model setup looks like, but all the code's provided. And then this was our prompt to them. And then here was the work that then Professor Carl told research assistant Joe to do this work, who generated this output, including like chain of thought. Then we sketched a larger example of a GRT involving like a variety of team members, different specialties, and we just didn't want to include it all in this paper, but we have other designs for larger GRT. Future research directions, all the codes available, and the more sophisticated GRT is visible here. Then we supplemented with many tools, like several dozen language model tools and several dozen language model cognitive capacities. The reason really being that many of these papers and tools are already more advanced than our work. But in fact, our work is really a prompt for other probably GRTs to then take in the paper as prompt and dispatch using these. And then we close with these narrative prompts and meta prompts. And so basically each language model agent has first off, in the future, they will probably be fine-tuned on a certain role. But ignoring that, they have a role-specific prompt that's like, you're in charge of getting grants, and so here's your considerations and so on. So there's role-specific prompting, but then also there's narrative prompting for the team scale. And then also just kind of to be fun, but also a bit more esoteric and long viewed. We consider these meta prompts because if these capacities really will be increasing the way that they are, and they are, then the level of abstraction to interface with GRTs goes way up, because they'll be able to implement lower level chain of thought. Like if you say, go be an accountant, they'll be able to do internal chain of thought, tree of thought, to say, okay, I need to prompt myself to be a reliable accountant and like develop a prompt for myself to be the best accountant I can be. So you won't have to go in at that level. This is another even higher level. And so just as kind of like a speculative exercise, also knowing that the paper will be a prompt, we just bring up a lot of topics and semantics. So that was the GRT work.
Really interesting. Well done. I mean, a lot of words there, about words. And would it be possible to sort of draw a diagram of the relationship between the human and the large language model, or the generative, the automated, or how would you put I mean, you talked about a GRT as being human and not human, as it were. Is there a way to like, could you do like a role diagram in sort of like an organizational chart kind of thing or something? So I could visualize it, if you will. Yeah.
Yep. So here, this is the AOS work. So this is the active entity ontology that we're inheriting.
Right.
And so in this situation, we have these areas of concern. And then
Right.
this is the natural language. But the reason why we use a controlled vocabulary and why these entities are defined in terms of their active inference terms is then we have the triple play.
Yeah.
Natural language, visualization, executable. And we have used GPT. We tell it, we're going to be giving you plain text representations of GRT,
Right.
output a visualization,
Okay.
and then we input these controlled expressions,
Okay.
and then it renders visualizations. And so in fact, this visualization in the paper was the input. We input the team description. But yeah, I agree. Clearer pictures of a human in engagement is probably helpful. And the key piece is that all agents interact through documents.
The reason I'm thinking about that at the moment is several. One, when I was president, I had Patricia come along and do mapping of the keynotes, and so she drew maps, if you want, or charts or diagrams of the presentations. And I had occasion to look at them again. And then the day before yesterday, I was attending a seminar put on by the Smithsonian Institute, the American Indian Museum in Washington, D.C. and New York. And they were talking about how to work with native Indians and American Indians using comics, and the role of comics in helping people learn about difficult topics. And it just occurred to me, it'd be really interesting if at some point there could be a generative comic maker who could, that would be even automated in some way, that could draw, representations of what you're talking about here that goes beyond the relational document to document kind of thing, but actually infers, if you want to use that word, a form of relationship in the way that the image is presented, but also the language is constructed. Because I can't draw comics, but I thought it'd be really interesting to see, just because I mean, I love what you're doing. I mean, it's really an interesting topic. But to sort of see it in human terms, if I can put it that way, rather than, or in addition to the academic paper terms. Does that am I making sense to
Yeah.
you?
Oh, 100%. And we're just putting out the leanest possible semantics.
Yeah, it's good.
So that the distillate can exist. But then we use, just like with equations in the active textbook group, we can use image prompting and text prompting. So we translate it to different languages and have it render different images.
Right.
So, but without the crystal of the protein, the X-ray experiment is not going to measure anything. So you can't just generate from nothing.
Sure.
The only way that, and so this is going to be the great GRT opportunity. What is the GRT that supports this exact setting, where these people speak this language, these two people like comics, this person likes movies, this person likes podcasts, and then can the semantics be expressed in a controlled vocabulary such that then there's integrity across those representations.
That's very exciting work, I think. Yeah.
And it relates to our systems conversations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant. Yeah. Like to do more somehow. Is this all in the coda for this afternoon's conversation, or is this another coda?
I put it here.
Okay,
here's the papers there.
All right.
So now let's kind of clean up from a few of as we're catching up, Peter.
Yeah,
we'll just, these notes exist copied from previous ones, so we'll just mention them, move on. So earlier Shingai blog was on systemism as ideology. That was one. conversation. What is the ideology of systems? Then this was a presentation from Shingai, and then all of this work was towards the ISSS XML, which we'll look at in a second, but just kind of cleaning up our trail. Talked about systems theoretic approaches to AI. Meserovich, Rosen. Okay. Get to SysXML in a minute. This was a discussion around really what is the deeper work we can do in education for systems, and how do we progress and synthesize on this work, which is playing out with the SysXML. Okay, Carl H mentioned a few different areas. Here was a tweet that Shingai shared about software engineers and the systematicity associated with making code. That led to a very interesting discussion. George spoke about computer science and engineering in the previous decades. And then Carl's father, like son. Then we talked, which we're going to come to in SysXML, but and I'll actually copy this into the SysXML directly, because this is very related, but we'll make a SysXML notes in a second. But just trying to get through this. Okay, then Carl brought in this topic of analytic autoethnography and collaborative autoethnography, complementing the phenomenological approach to ethnography of oneself or otherwise with the analytic approach. George shared several pieces with us, and then we discussed like how you want to recompose them or publish them or what we could do about it. So maybe we could talk about that, and then SysXML.
Can you put the link to this coda in the chat? Because I
yeah.
It's in my meeting notes, and it didn't come up with this detail for some reason. It came up with something less than. So, thank you.
Yeah. So George, about these 4 short articles.
So those were they were intended, pardon me, at the time that I wrote them, they were intended to support the idea of why universities in general, but specifically University of Washington Tacoma, should provide or have a system science program of some kind, a degree program. And they were written as 4 what do you call it, editorial type articles to be sequenced and submitted. And about the same time that I finished those up, our illustrious chancellor just nixed any possibility of doing anything like that. So I just shelved those articles. But they argue basically that we need a new version of liberal arts liberal studies that in the 18th, 19th, early 20th century was supposed to be the route to becoming a global thinker.
Yeah.
Right, and that
project, and we're also going to go over the clustering of isomorphies because there's so
Oh,
many.
sorry. I think that's
Whoa. Not one of the four humans, but a secret fifth thing. Okay, continue though, George.
well, anyway, so the idea was that the needs of society today are for uh, generalist or what was the term I used? Well, it was actually, man, I am just having, you got links to those or did I don't remember if I sent you
there's links to your page here on the Coda.
Yeah, you did email the full. I mean, do you want me to bring those documents into here right now?
well, I just can't remember
Okay,
right off.
it's all good.
And in any case, the idea was, is there anything worth bringing back now? Because I think the fundamental argument is still the same. System science replaces
Yeah.
but could be a much broader, more fundamental approach to a generalized education that would make people capable of being more versatile. That was it.
That's a reasonable proposition.
Yeah.
What came to mind when you were just talking there was I met when I was in South Africa, I met a gentleman called Theo Andrew, who was the former dean of engineering at the University of Durban, or Durban University of Technology. He's now a vice chancellor of the university, helping to reorganize. He's reorganized the operations side of the university using VSM and other systems approaches, and he's now doing it on the academic front. And I got a lot of sense that there was a real interest in system thinking, system science in Africa as a way to transcend the enormous challenges or to help with them. I mean, not least of which is 13 languages in South Africa as official languages. So I don't know if that's worth, as you've sort of had, sounds like the door shut a bit in Tacoma, what we should be doing to seek other homes for this idea in whether it be organizational homes or academic homes, or, create our own homes, or I do it within the College of Exploration's container, which is kind of where I'm headed at the moment.
Think I want to add anything, or I can give a point.
Nothing to add. Yeah.
Okay, just about what you said there, Peter, and about publication. So, I mean, my first reflex was always publish as is. It just takes no more work. You get a DOI. If it's okay to have out publicly, then I feel like everything should be pre-printed and published that way. So that's zero effort. And yeah, there's some outdated information, but you can just retrocast the publication date so that it can be cited for what it is. But then beyond that,
and what are you referring to in particular there? What did you pick?
George sent these 4 short articles.
Oh, right. Okay.
I just thought, well, I mean, they could be sent around as, or you could just have a Zenodo link, just like we have with GRT. You could just have a Zenodo that gives you a DOI, so then it becomes a real citable document. But beyond that, whether you choose to take that or not, is like bringing that together, maybe with some other authors coming in, Shingai, Lin, and making it a renewed call for all of the discussions that we've been having here, and touching on technological changes and opportunities, touching on the global necessity and what you've just mentioned, Peter, and just
Can you put the links to the 4 documents, or George, can you send them to me, or
Yeah, I can send them to you. I just wanted to read sort of the first paragraph of the first article, give you a flavor of where this is going.
okay.
And it says it's addressed to all college-bound students. What are you going to be doing for a living in 15 years? Here's a good bet. You not only cannot guess what your job will be, you cannot even know what your career will be.
Right.
You might think right now that you can guess, but you would most likely be wrong, no matter how much you believed it. And then I go on to talk about how the world is changing so rapidly, and we can't even, I mean, this was even truer right now.
Oh yeah.
And then go back to talking about liberal studies of the 19th and 20th century being the route to becoming a global thinking person and whatnot. And then the how we got into specializations and so forth. So anyway, yeah, I can send these articles to you. And then the question though, or what I had proposed, I sent them out to Daniel and Xinghai and Lynn, was to edit them, compress them, bring them into a single article, edit out all the no longer true stuff, and see if we could make a comprehensive thing that would be brought up to date for currency. And now, Daniel, you seem to be saying, no, let's just go ahead and publish them as is.
Well, I mean, if you want them to be available and citable as is, I will upload them to Zenodo for you. Just make a page that looks like this, that with just you as the author, whatever publication date you want, and whatever abstract you want, or just say this is a uploaded historical copy of this or that article. But if you want that, I'll just do it. But whether or not you upload them as is just for the documentation, I think it's not required. This is a good thing to proceed with.
Well, let me let me think about that. As I was going through them, it seemed to me that, oh boy, this is, since it's no longer true in the sense that we didn't follow through on any of the stuff I was proposing. And the core is the ideas about why system science would be the new liberal studies. It just seemed to me that it would be better to bring it up to date and extract the other stuff. So I kind of feel like I'd prefer to proceed in that direction.
Yeah, that sounds totally good.
And then the question is where, so I'm not familiar with Zenodo, but where in general should we try to present it? Because it has to get out there. It's not just an academic exercise. This is meant to be an editorial.
Zenodo, all it does is host and give you a DOI. So they definitely, like, if you, then it's all up to you to share it around and everything. So it's great for documenting, but it's not like a journal as such. But I mean, that would be awesome to go for either a general purpose journal, if it's within the format and the scope, or to an education journal. But I mean, beyond, we don't just want to add words onto the pile. So how will we make this call powerful and connect it with recommendations and like actionable steps that, like, what if somebody reads and says, all right, I want to do this at my department, then what will they do next?
Well, my target audience was basically, even though I said to future students, college level students, the actual target audience was meant to be university administrators and the political milieu. In other words, it's going to take political support from the outside. The administrators aren't just going to create out of nothing, new departments. They're going to have to feel that society is saying, yes, this is what we want. This is what we need. And so that was really the sort of the hidden audience, if you will, or the hidden agenda to address that audience. I had thought in terms of, how like in science and nature, you have these, science anyway, is called perspectives. They're fairly short essays, but they really do address social issue kind of things. And so that was sort of the vehicle I had kind of envisioned. Anyway, let me pursue editing or putting these things together. And I sent them out mostly to get some kind of feedback about, how valuable you guys thought it would be.
Yeah, I do have two quick thoughts. George, I don't know if you saw, but I did email you a document where I put all of the pieces into a single document and left a few comments and also removed a few things that I thought weren't relevant. I can resend that to you. That was a couple of weeks ago, maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, let's see. It was in the thread, the original email thread on teaching system science. Yeah, I sent you a message on the 12th.
Oh, for crying out loud. All right, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds great. Yep. And then another thought is, I think Rachel Donald's podcast could be a great venue for getting the message out there. So once there's an updated article, yeah, I think, maybe she wants to invite you on to have a conversation. But she seems to have a really nice audience of policymakers and scientists. And I was listening to that debate that you sent out, and like they were talking all about this and how the reductionist mindset and people living in silos and the lack of an integrative systems perspective is holding us back. So I think that could be a great venue for getting the message out there.
Okay, excellent.
Oh, awesome. Now also just to continue catching up, Peter. So this is the ISSS XML. So I'll put this into a notes page, but we talked about systems-oriented programming. And drawing from George's textbook.
Right.
How can we go from chapters 3, 4, 5, and 8 into the specification of the systemese system? Ontology, language, analysis, and knowledge, and then synthesizing that into a specification. So kind of air gapping the book itself by extracting, and Shingai has already done a ton of work on this direction. As did I a little bit on chapters 3 and 4, I think. But basically we're going through the book, those specific chapters, to extract the technical specification for systemese and the full system of interest. Then we'll be turning towards CAD, likely, and mapping this synthesis of specification to the capacities of the CAD framework. We may be already totally express what we need, or maybe we need to look at other frameworks, and then thinking towards a front end, back end system that will help us make an interactive systemese suite that was pointed towards, but does not exist today.
That's ambitious.
How that's George. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean sysxml. It's just we talk about sys HTML, XML. We're just kind of gesturing at different. And this was HTML being to web pages as sys HTML would be to systems oriented programming. That it would be a plain text representation that we could execute the triple play in with the visuals, natural language, and then the executable simulations.
Wow. How does it relate to model-based systems engineering and SysML there?
George, how would you say it relates to SysML?
Well, let me go back to the model-based engineering. There are two senses of model-based engineering, and I'll address the one that says we've got all of these patterned models of different kinds of systems to which engineers can then refer and use as a guide to engineering a new system, say. The whole last part of the book is about a model. You were talking about VSM earlier, but I had worked on the idea of complex, adaptive, and evolvable system model and submodels as archetypes. And so that would fit that bill. And then all of this front end stuff, the analysis and capturing in the knowledge base and then generating simulations and so forth, could be guided by the model that's in the latter part of the book. Now, as far as sys, sys
ML.
ML, thanks. I'm getting too many MLs in here. SysML, it basically was a great attempt to add what oh, good grief. What's the other one? The we've talked about it.
UML.
UML.
Yeah.
It basically added functionality, functional modeling to what UML. And however, as I understand it, they're still struggling to get something that's really sufficiently general that it can be used in a lot of, just any sort of engineering application.
Right.
That's what I got, and I haven't followed up on it, but that's what I got from Swami. Remember Swami?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not right. I mean, the INCOSE meeting is this week. I'm not attending, but what I have been doing is helping Sue Gabriel on a systems roundtable for the INCOSE. She's on the agenda, as it were, once a day for an hour to do the roundtable. So I've been listening vicariously to various systems engineers coming in and talking about various presentations that have been made as part of the International Symposium in Hawaii and also online virtually. And so I was a member of INCOSE. I'm thinking about rejoining INCOSE. And again, the topic of introducing systems thinking, systems ideas to systems engineers, it continues to amaze me how systems engineers don't think systemically. It's just mind-boggling, frankly. And to listen in these roundtables, to how they had something called Systems Thinking 101 on Monday, and I don't know what was in it, but they were going about how this is needed within the systems engineering community, and for systems engineers to know systems thinking, and for systems engineers to be able to talk about this when they're dealing with other people and so on and so forth. And it was just, I don't know, that's why I bring it up in the context of what you're talking about now, is that, as we know, George, because we've been to those meetings, they are an audience, even if they're not that receptive to what you've been saying. I don't know.
Well, they've got the not invented here syndrome.
Yeah.
Really bad. The other thing about SysML is that it is geared specifically toward the idea of engineering, whereas what I'm proposing is a general case of analysis of existing systems, which could be applied to organizations, to systems engineering of product, but also to sciences.
Yeah. Yeah, here is where we talked. Okay. UML described structure, relationships. It was a good tool. SysML included functionality. But we kind of talked about this like levels, like nested levels of totality in terms of implementation of systems modeling approaches as a program, as a package, as an analytical representation with the equations and category theory, as a language, systemese, executable dialect versus anglophonic dialect, all in support of the paradigm of systemsness and systems literacy. So you could write a program about systemsness in another language. But you added this link, Peter.
Well, I just was just because I was thinking about, in COSI, because I'm going to be talking to them later on and reflecting on what you're talking about and agreeing that I like the idea of system science being a new liberal arts kind of replacement. If it could be packaged in a particular way or presented in a particular way. So, MBSE is still a big topic within the INCOSI world, and even, I mean, we had a gentleman on last night who was talking about a 50-year project within the Air Force. I don't know, he didn't talk about specifics, but that it is a very complex project, and they're attempting to bring in model-based systems engineering to a project that hasn't had model-based systems engineering. It was all on the old way of doing requirements and having documentation in previous ways of approaching systems engineering, I think, for want of a better term. And he was also talking about the need for recruitment of young people. I mean, this has come up now, like several times, is that young people are not getting their mental models are such that they find it very difficult to come to a systems thinking or systems engineering approach. And they were concerned that in one keynote this week, there was some projection that the US in future years is only going to have 30% of the trained people it needs to be able to develop projects in a STEM environment. And so that there's an urgent need to address this from a young person's perspective. And so that's another topic we've been talking about, is how do you introduce these ideas even in school? And of course, that then brings me to systems literacy and what we've been talking about over the last several years. And they've talked about a book series called Baby University. and anyway, so it's like, where do you begin this topic? Is another, piece of the interesting system we're trying to analyze and work on ourselves, right? So
well, if the idea that I had, and I'll just sort of throw it out there, that if you could get a system science degree program or even just a certificate program, but motivated by the idea that this is really going to help people get good jobs
Sure.
into the university at the undergraduate level. That would then eventually, as we've seen so many other degree programs, move up into the master's and PhD level, but it also will push downward
Oh,
because
yeah.
you start training teachers to do the simpler parts, if you will, of systems thinking in K-12.
Well,
And
another, yeah, exactly. Another topic that came up in a workshop we ran on ocean acoustics in May was the whole idea of micro credentialing for technicians and technical people. And so I don't know if that's another agenda item for a discussion at some point, is the whole idea of micro credentials or micro, incremental pieces of learning that we might be able to conjure up in some way. Anyway, that's another thought.
Yeah, I've seen several things in that area. The current
I mean, my reaction to that is that micro credentials work very well for technical skills.
Yeah, I know.
But when you're talking about systems thinking, systems science, systems literacy, and so forth, I think you have to take the whole package. You can't just say, all right, today we're only going to look at network theory. And irrespective of anything, or not network theory, but network manipulation. Since we're talking about credentialing for capacity, a skill, for example, using a network database or something of that nature. And that's all fine, but I think what I'm driving at is getting a holistic program in front of people so that they can get a sense of what we're driving at. When we say that is a system, they should be saying, oh yeah, I can see the parts and how they're connected and what they're doing and how it changes over time and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that we're all in the United States with our United States viewpoints. One of the things that sort of struck me about being in South Africa was exactly that point. And, the UK government have approved what they're calling a systems thinking in practice apprenticeship, which is an 18-month master's degree program for people in mid-career. And I think at least that should be a potential reference for some of the conversations going on here, because there is there's a lot of work going on in other places around the world, let's put it that way, that is, and I'll just give you this link here, because there is work going on and in the international context, and so being able to at least be aware of what's going on. Anyway, just put it out there.
Totally agreed. Okay, I'll copy that in. Any other
We're responding to what Peter just said. I'll note that it seems to me, I haven't done any analytical work on this, but it seems to me that more than half of the citations that I get, or mentions in ResearchGate or whatever they call it, are coming from people who I'm pretty sure work well. It often says somebody in India said da, 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 somebody in I don't know that I've had any African, but somebody in these various had a number of Chinese.
Oh yeah, China's all over it.
So yeah, I I know they're out there. The others are the Western European and
Mm,
American and Canadian and so forth.
mm.
I did have a quick question I wanted to try and squeeze in here, related to the work I'm doing on SysXML. So I feel like the current state of things is that I've extracted the core concepts from the ontology, which is sort of like the philosophy, the why, the systems language, which is the mathematics and the how, the deep systems analysis, which is the process of capturing the information about the system, and then the knowledge base, which is where you store and retrieve the information for modeling. So I think I've captured most of the important information at a high level. I'm curious, George, from your perspective, would it be helpful or necessary to have a bit more information about the deep systems analysis process? What I have right now is just like a high level overview of what the different 7 components are. Do you think that a specification would require a bit more detail and maybe like a case study of these different components applied to some sort of system?
Yeah, so you're coming from what is it, chapter 5 or so?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, whereas 6 and 7 go into the actual, so is that needed, 6 and 7?
Yeah, because there's a lot of detail that anybody who is doing software to develop this would have to know, what the steps are and so forth. So yes, the answer is yes. And there are some kind of examples in the book. The chapter on the economy, I think that's 9, looking at the energy sector of an economy. So yeah, it would require a lot more expansion of that general model that was in chapter 5. Looking at the deep analysis thing, that's where you actually go through the process, and the book does have a worked out example of that.
Okay, great.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, fellows. See you next time.
Yep.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.